I just can't help myself. I won't address directly your question about Senator Manchin, but I will say this is not a loophole. I mean, I mentioned earlier that every developed country in the world helps to encourage their manufacturers to make more investments. And we just passed legislation to do that in ways we have never done before. And here we are, less than a week later, saying, well, you know what? We've changed our minds. We're going to say to manufacturers, a number of them who are, larger companies, they employ millions of Americans, by the way, and provide millions of products, have millions of consumers and provide products to all of us. We're going to say to these folks, you somehow are the kind of manufacturers that we don't want to help. Bonus depreciation is not a loophole. It's a considered policy of the United States Congress, the House and the Senate, to try to encourage us to have more investment in America, therefore more economic growth and more jobs. And again, we're not even at the halfway point in terms of what other countries do. The UK does a lot more than we do. And when manufacturers are trying to decide where they're going to put their next plant, they look at this. And I really believe when you look back at what happened in 2017, perhaps the most effective thing that was done, and remember, it lowered the rates for businesses, but it said to businesses, if you come here and invest, you can get an immediate write-off. So expensive equipment, let's say that might go into a fab to make semiconductors. I mean, isn't that something we want to encourage? So it's not a loophole, it's a tax policy. If we were responsible, what we would do is not set up a whole other system of taxation, this so-called book tax, which is a new calculation that no one's ever seen before because it's even a change from the traditional book tax. We would instead go into the tax code and say, well, this tax preference isn't good, this one is, and actually do the hard work of legislating. But not to say that we're going to just decide that we're going to establish a new book tax that says you can't take bonus depreciation as an example. By the way, there are other parts of our tax code that are also affected. You guys know what an ESOP is, Employee Owns Plan. It's an employee-owned company, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. You know that people use what are called ESOPs to encourage more participation from workers in the company. They're affected by this as well because they lose a lot of their tax preferences under this book tax. So they're telling us that they're very worried that it's going to discourage new ESOPs and cause some existing ESOPs no longer to be effective. And so, we should like ESOPs. Those are good things. Democrats typically do, too. Stock options. A lot of tech companies use stock options. They're also affected by this. But the manufacturing piece is the biggest piece, and that's because so many manufacturers use this bonus depreciation. But it's not just limited to them. It's energy companies as well. So in 1986, Congress, in its wisdom, decided to do this, to set up a new book tax. It was part of the 86 Tax Act. It lasted about 2.5 years, and it was repealed. Why? Because it's incredibly complicated, because it's unfair, because as the AICPA told us in their letter last week, this is the CPAs who would benefit from complexity. It doesn't make sense to have two different tax systems and punish some businesses, therefore some workers, therefore some consumers, and not others. So we actually can learn from history here. We tried this before. It didn't work. It was ended. It was repealed because it makes no sense. That's what is going on here. I know it's complicated and you get into all these tax issues, but basically what it says is we're going to set up another system of taxation that takes away some of the benefits that Congress traditionally wants to provide. Why does that make sense? It's always bad policy, but it's terrible policy when we're looking at 40-year high inflation and the second quarter of negative economic growth. On the IRS chart, put that up for a second again if you would, guys. This is one, as you may know, I've worked on a lot. I was, back in the 90s, the co-chair of the IRS Commission. I'm actually someone who believes we should put more funding into the IRS. You know where we should put it? Into technology, because they're way behind. And my constituents are affected by that, because they can't get answers, because they can't get someone to answer the phone, because they can't deal with our tax administration system because we are so antiquated, and we work in silos, and we don't have the latest technology. All this money going to the IRS, you would think it would go toward technology first, taxpayer service second, which are related. 6.5% of it goes to technology.
There's a chart on that.
6.5% of it. 4% of it goes to taxpayer service. what it's doing is it's doubling the size of the IRS in terms of people who will be auditing the people I represent. And we talked earlier about how that's going to affect small businesses, farmers, ranchers, and so on. So even in this area where I would normally say, okay, helping the IRS to be more effective, that's not a bad thing because small businesses in Ohio are negatively impacted right now by the IRS's lack of ability to be effective in dealing with them and giving them answers to their questions. But that's not even part of this. So there are plenty of targets of opportunity here for us to try to stop or improve this legislation. And in response to your questions earlier, we have a responsibility to do that.
We're going to have to run. We're 15 minutes late for a caucus meeting. So thank you all very much.